And hello, good people of the internet. It is I, Tommie Kelly. This is a very special episode of Adventures in Woo Woo. This is the day that I've been looking forward to for so long. It's the launch day of the Nidana Cards, which is an oracle deck that myself and Duncan Barford have been putting together over the last while, based on, I suppose, the fundamental teachings of the Buddha. So over the next half an hour or so, I'll be talking to Duncan and we'll talk a bit about the theory behind the cards, how Duncan first came across them, his kind of interest and how he got us to this point where we did this. And then we go through some of the cards and explain how you would use them in a divination or even in a contemplative setting. There's two versions of the deck that are available, the deluxe version and the standard version. If you're familiar with the 40 Servants, it's a very similar idea. The booklet comes with both versions of the deck, and in that you'll have information about what the cards mean, what they stand for, what the reversal is, and some opening thoughts from Duncan himself. All of that information is also available on the website. All the links are in the show description. I hope you liked the cards and I hope you liked this chat. It was wonderful as ever to talk to Duncan. And I think even if you're not into the idea of having another oracle deck in your life, there's some interesting topics that is brought up by this system. And so it could be worth your while to have a look anyway. So over to Tommie and Duncan. Okay, so Duncan, for about the three people who watch this channel who don't know who you are, to perhaps explain who you are and, what's your story, man?
Yeah, so I'm Duncan, and probably best known for things like The Baptist Head, which I did with Alan Chapman in the mid-2000s now. Yeah. Which, interestingly, there's a new edition of that coming out soon. I'm just putting together the final touches for the new version of that.
Goat-skinned, hardback, 3 volumes in one, satanic symbol on the cover, I hope, no less than that.
I think that's the plan. It might be hardback anyway. So, so that should be along in a few months, hopefully. But also, I did the podcast Occult Experiments in the Home, and I've also got a current podcast called Hierophany.
And the Hierophany is a trip through the tarot, the major arcana of the tarot deck, kind of, while it goes on different excursions too, I suppose.
Yeah, it is.
So you're not new to divination?
No. The idea with Hierophany is to take the archetypes of the tarot and really explore how they might manifest in everyday life. It's very much a kind of hands-on thing. If this archetype's manifesting in my life, how do I recognize it and what should I do about it? That's the kind of subtext of Hierophany.
We're quite similar in our approaches to what we do online, is that we always come from a personal experience point of view, to the point that it's the subtitle to Occult Experiments in the Home. And I think that's the best way, I think, to approach magic, is to be honest about it in both ways, good and the bad. And, because there's just so much dishonesty and lies in various, I suppose, spiritual circles, or putting things more grander than they are, or putting things less grand than they are too, not being honest on both sides. So when you come from a personal experience point of view, and from an honest personal experience point of view, I think it's the best approach.
Yeah, so do I. And I love listening to it as well. I'm always a bit disappointed that some people that just don't seem to want to talk about their personal experience. My ears always prick up when people start talking about stuff that happened to them. So it's not only what I put out there, it's what I like listening to as well.
Yeah. I suppose there is a kind of a thing as well that people have, that you're not meant to talk about some of these experiences, or it feels like you're bragging or all that kind of stuff. But I think then if no one talks about it, then there's no roadmaps for the next person coming along. So you have been doing the Baptist Head stuff, and more recently you have arrived back doing podcasts, and the website's still going. You still do an occasional blog post, I believe.
Yeah, every now and then. Blogs are a bit old hat these days, aren't they? It's all podcasts where it's happening.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of because with like Substack and stuff like that, I think there's a move into newsletters and stuff, and the newsletter I've been doing has gone down well. But I think the actual blog post thing is probably, I don't know, is going the way of the past? Maybe. Could be a resurgence. Every now and again when you think blogs are dead, then it becomes fashionable again.
Yeah.
So here's the question. At what point during all of this, Duncan, did you first become aware of the thing that is the Nidanas?
Right. Well, as usual with most things that we do, it's always a kind of load of influences all coming together at the same time. So with the Nidanas, I first encountered them. I was helping out at my local Buddhist centre in Brighton, this strange little place. It's gone now. It's been gone for
Right.
years. But it was this little Dharma group that used to meet in these premises that were actually an old gambling den. You had to get
perfect.
you had to get to this like little windowless room down this kind of corridor. And yeah, it used to be an old illegal gambling den, but this Dharma group had taken it over and now having meditation groups in there and stuff like that. And I got quite involved in them, and they used to get guest speakers in.
Right.
And this guy turned up one weekend called Lee Brassington, who's actually, quite a well-known Dharma teacher, and he usually teaches the jhanas, the concentration states. But he was doing the Nidanas that day. I didn't know what these things were, so I turned up. And he gave this lecture, and I was absolutely blown away. So there are two suttas,
Suttas.
S-U-T-T-A-S. Buddhist
suttas,
teaching,
as they would say here.
Yeah.
Two suttas.
Where the Buddha discusses the Nidanas. And what Nidana means basically is cause. So the Nidanas are causes that sort of link up in a chain. And there are two sets of them, two teachings, two sets, two suttas. So the main teaching, the really important one, is, the mainstream Nidanas.
Yeah. That if you do a Google search, that's what you find, essentially, is that first, it's 12, right? Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, about that.
Maybe, possibly, a number like that, yeah.
So the standard ones, they delineate the causes from death to ignorance.
Okay.
Basically, they delineate, what happens in the everyday world, life as it is, which from a Buddhist perspective is pretty grim.
They're a happy bunch. They would call themselves realists, in fairness, but they're...
Yeah. But then there's a more obscure teaching from the Buddha, which delineates another set of Nidanas known as the transcendental Nidanas. Okay. And they go in the opposite direction. So they go from suffering up to enlightenment. And they detail all the steps. So in the first lot, you're going from effect to cause, and in the second lot, you're going from cause to effect.
Yeah. So how you get in and how you get out, essentially.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that old nursery rhyme of I know an old woman who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly, and then she swallowed a spider to catch the fly. So it's a bit like that. So there's death. Where does that relate then? Well. Death because you were born. This follows the sequence through. So it's essentially a retelling of the old woman who swallowed a fly from the Buddhist. It is
like that. It's really like that. Another analogy might be little kids. When they ask you why, why do I have to go to school? Well, because mummy and daddy will get in trouble if you don't go to school. Why? Why will you get in trouble? Yeah. And then you get this like chain of causes. So that's basically
the usual answer to that though is here, have an iPad and shut up.
So if we think about that first set of Nidanas, we start off with death.
Mm-hmm. Okay, as you do. Start off happy,
because it's the thing that's certain in life is that one day you're going to die. So that's why you start with death, because it's absolutely certain.
Is it starting also with death because it's saying that death is the way we relate to nearly everything then? That because it's the certain thing, and therefore it's the looming shadow at all times and informs all we kind of do. Is that the idea that's why it's starting there? I think
so, yeah. It's the one thing that we can be absolutely sure about, that is what it appears to be. We are going to die.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ascend personally, I've decided, but that's me. Yeah. On the third day, I'll rise again in accordance with certain scriptures. But
so, what the Buddha does is he takes that and he says, so what is the cause of death? What is the cause of death? And the style of thinking in the Nidanas is really, really interesting. Sometimes the answers can be quite counterintuitive, but they're always pretty brilliant when you sort of inquire into them a bit more. So what is the cause of death? So ordinarily we might think something like, a heart attack or old age or something like that.
Yeah.
But what the Buddha always goes for is the most fundamental, all-embracing answer that you can give to that question. Okay, so the cause of death is being born.
Which is
That's the
fair.
concept.
That it is the ultimate cause of
Yeah,
death is birth. Yeah.
yeah. You're not born, you don't die. If
Yeah.
you're born, you will die. So that's the answer to that one. And then taking the
And it keeps
next,
going.
take the next link in the chain. So, what is the cause of birth? Why do we get born?
Yeah, yeah.
And the next step in the chain, the Buddha tells us, is becoming, because there is a tendency for things to come into existence.
That seems to be the nature, at least one nature of existence, is that things become, things happen.
Yeah. We live in a universe where stuff happens, don't we? And then you keep going, and you keep going,
Yeah,
you keep
through
going.
the whole thing. Well, I suppose without going through them all, because we will do individual videos on each of the cards a bit more in depth. In the first section, where does it then ultimately end up? I wonder, given that it's Buddhist.
So where it ends up is ignorance.
Yeah.
Is ignorance. So death is caused ultimately by ignorance. And ignorance in this context means our human nature prompts us to fundamentally misconstrue the nature of reality. That's what ignorance means in this context. We just misconstrue reality. We make something out of nothing.
Okay.
And because there's then something there, it will come into being and it will die.
Okay. So is it kind of more saying, rather than that whole idea of that the world is a complete illusion, it's that we're kind of delusional about it? Is that more the approach of it, or is it is there an out there according to this cosmology?
There is certainly an out there, yeah. It's the way that we relate to that out there that leads to death and suffering, according to this model. We misconstrue reality, and that's what ignorance means. But I mean, we've only picked up on a few steps in that chain.
It doesn't jump. Death, birth, ignorance.
No. And there's a lot of interesting stages in between that take that fundamental misconstrual of reality and how that then comes down, becomes the everyday world that we experience.
How prevalent was this in like kind of mainstream? I know there's plenty of different mainstream Buddhism, but like, given I read a fair amount of Buddhism over my time, I hadn't really heard about the Nidanas until your podcast, or I assume you talked about them previous to it to me. Is it something that it's very prevalent and I just didn't come across it, or is it like some sort of esoteric Buddhist teaching?
Yeah, it's not that prevalent, I don't think, but it is absolutely fundamental. I mean, I was blown away when I sat and heard this teacher, Lee Brassington, go through the Nidanas, because everything is there about Buddhism. Everything about Buddhism is packed into the teaching. You've got the Four Noble Truths. You've even got
the cause of suffering.
You've got the stages of insight. The Daniel Ingram stuff, the Theravada stages of insight built into the transcendental Nidanas. The whole lot is there. It's also a psychology as well. It's a deeply psychological model. And this is something that's important to point out, I think. This model of reality that the Nidanas describe is very much an experiential model. It's a phenomenological model. It very much goes by what we perceive. So when we get to one of the stages, one that's body, the human body. That's one of the Nidanas. And the cause of the body is the mind in this model.
Yes.
And that goes completely against our cultural suppositions about what causality is. We have this idea that material things cause material things. So how could the mind possibly cause the body? But of course, our experience of the body is always meant.
Sure, our experience of everything is here, starts here. Like, it arises.
So in that sense, the mind causes the body.
And there is another section, though, in like the Sixth Sense, where it's talking about the mind as well as a sense, and which is why you're saying that you think the kind of it's. While the translation is right, it's probably not the most helpful way to describe mind, and you're saying it's probably a bit more akin to like maybe consciousness or psyche is then the word that you preferred.
Yeah, because because me and you, Tommy, we have broken from tradition here and there with this,
sure,
haven't
yes.
we?
Yeah.
There is some Western esoteric influences creeping into the words we've used and the images that we've used as well.
You can tell that it was created by two case magicians and not strict Buddhists. Yeah, so that's definitely
Yeah. So what I decided to go for was, like you were saying, I decided to use the word psyche rather than mind. Just to get across this idea that this is something. It's the soul, basically. I think we're talking, and of course, Buddhism, refutes the notion of a soul.
Lets it in the back door when it needs it.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a divergence for us to use that term, but I think it does clear up some confusions. But
yeah, it would say in the sixth sense, it would see mind as another sense in the way of like you see, you hear, you smell, and you think. That's the way that kind of the idea of.
So in that context, mind is, like you were saying, a sense. It's that capacity to reflect, basically, isn't it? It's the capacity to recognize certain experiences as internal. That's what mind is. Mind is an inevitable part of being human. It's something that arises from having a human form. But we've also got the other Nidanas that I talked about, the transcendental ones, and those delineate a path whereby we can get beyond that. We can see beyond that.
So the first half you'd say is this is the problem. This is why the problem arises, and then the second half is here's what you can do about it.
Yeah.
So we should perhaps maybe move into that so it shows the way out rather than just go, listen, life's a bit shitty. The end. The directionality changes in the sense. So in one, it's from death the way back, and then this is the way out. So I suppose it meets somewhere in the middle, kind of, I suppose.
It's basically kind of delineating the same territory, but in an opposite direction. So one way of thinking about the Nidanas and the transcendental Nidanas is they're sort of like converses of each other.
Rather than dancing around, we should maybe mention a few of them, what they are, might make a bit more sense.
Yeah, the transcendental ones, So they start with suffering. Yeah, with the transcendental ones, we're moving from cause to effect. So suffering, we start with suffering because, again, that's one of the guaranteed things that we're bound to experience in life. What suffering can give rise to is faith. Faith being, the hope and the intention that things will get better.
Yeah.
I think in our culture, faith is associated with unfounded belief in things.
Yeah, sure.
But, but what we're talking about here is if things are feeling a bit crap, then we make the effort to improve things. We set ourselves an idea that things can be better.
It's the fate of believing that something is possible, rather than it's like a fate as opposed to a lack of hope, I suppose. Rather than it's fate in believing something because someone told you have to believe it. It's the fate that something is happening, and there's a method to the madness, perhaps, something like that along that way.
Yeah, and then if you've got faith, that of course predisposes you to wanting things to get better and to move in a direction where it looks likely that things will get better, and then that kind of goes into successive stages. I think there's gladness,
happiness, rapture.
Yeah.
All those cool stages that everyone enjoys. Yeah. But what I like about it is that has to be cultivated. It's like it's a thing that has to be moved towards. Like you have to start in a place where you don't have that, and you have to be great. Try and find a place where you're grateful for what you have, which is really hard sometimes because you go, "Why would I be grateful for this pile of shite?" But that's to say, it has to be cultivated. You have to make an effort because it's not going to be. Well, here's some stuff to be grateful about. Now, you can move along the path. No, you have to make that section of the path, I suppose, yourself.
You do, yeah. So you're going from cause to effect, but that's not a kind of necessary relationship. Some people might be confronted with suffering, and they might just suffer. There's no guarantee that faith will
arise from
develop
from suffering. Well, and clearly doesn't a lot of the time.
No. So it's so here the Nidanas are sort of pointing us in the most sort of skillful direction. So the effect is not a necessary consequence of the cause. It has to be cultivated, as you were saying.
So with the thing of suffering, you've the option, I suppose, to despair and give in and allow it, or you have this option of going, right, there is something above this that can be moved towards, which is the fate, but you have to make the choice.
Yeah. I mean, where there's suffering, instead you could, like you were saying, just suffer, or you could get angry, or you could get depressed. Or, there's all sorts of different possibilities.
It's almost like it's a default position. The hard thing to move out of it is to say, in spite of all that, something is happening here, that I can move towards. And it probably does involve the kind of aspect of faith that we kind of don't like anymore, is that it involves holding on to an idea that isn't present quite now. That it's you kind of have to make a leap of faith. That's what faith is. It's it's a leap into the darkness, hoping that you're caught.
And that's why these are the transcendental Nidanas. It's moving towards something that isn't there yet.
Yeah,
as you said.
But then after the bliss comes the laundry, as Jack Cornfield would say, and you have you go through the disenchantment at that point.
Yeah.
Is this the equivalent of a Dark Night of the Soul thing, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, they line up pretty much with the stages of insight.
Right.
Yeah. Got concentration. Rapture is very much like the arising and passing in.
Sure, yes.
Daniel Ingram's description of things. Disenchantment, as you were saying, is like the dark night.
The way we decided to depict it is a guy in a dark room, despairing, disenchanted. And I like to disenchanted more than, I suppose, a word like despair or whatever, in that at one point you were enchanted, you know what I mean? But the enchantment was probably a false enchantment, and then to get out of that, you have to be disenchanted from that, which is such a magical act, and then re-enchanted into the truth. But the thing about the image that we use is that the door is open at all time. In a sense, it's a choice that you're sitting in the darkness. But because at some point you have to, that is a stage that you have to let, in order to let go and to release the fundamental delusion we have about it.
Yeah, and that stage of disenchantment comes after, I think, the one that we called insight. In the original sutta, it's called the knowledge of the way that things really are. It's called something like that, but we went for insight.
Yeah. Mostly because it doesn't look as cool on a card. Big thing, yeah.
Takes up most of the card.
Yeah.
But the idea that disenchantment comes from a breakthrough. This often happens. We have some sort of radical breakthrough. We see the truth of a certain situation. Sure. And there it is. There's the truth. But
yeah, no escaping it.
No, maybe it's good, but it might not kind of suit our preferences. We see the reality of the universe. Maybe we hoped that it would be something else. So that initial kind of amazement. On
a personal level, it's like you realizing some shitty behavior or some, asshole tendency that you have in yourself that you didn't realize. So you'd like to think you're, a good, decent person, and go, oh no, all these years I've been doing this. So So you're disenchanted with yourself, but it's also a good thing because now you get to stop doing that. That you can't do that again because you've seen it. You've seen it for what it actually is.
So that disenchantment phase can often be about, exercising some compassion. It's all about letting go, and all of the steps in the transcendental Nidanas are really about that. Letting go of more and more and more.
Yeah.
Until finally there's nothing left to let go of.
Yeah. In our depiction of the angel coming down and taking us into the hand, and there's something quite nice about that as well. In that, I know a lot of people I've heard that when they have some of their their deep insightful or awakening or enlightenment or whatever word you want to use for that experience that happens when you mess with this type of stuff. There's a sense of feeling that they've been held, and it's a thing that people express an awful lot. So it's like the handout coming into, returning, I think is a very apt kind of image. But also having that kind of angel image that we use, again, is bringing a bit more into where we're coming from with it. You have the knowledge conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, solar angels or what, all of these different names that are put on the same kind of experience. And it's nice to kind of get it in there, but it's not really shoehorned in there because it fits perfectly. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love it because I think that the moment of awakening, that first awakening experience is synonymous with the knowledge and communication of the Holy Guardian Angel. I was pleased that we could kind of smuggle
for
that
sure.
in.
Yeah. Then what happens at the end? The final one is that it? Do we start again? Is it cyclical? What's the Buddhist kind of teaching on the Nidanas when you get out? Are you out for good?
Yeah, so the last one we've got is wisdom. And that one's about, attaining liberation, but knowing that that's what it is, recognizing it for what it is. It's one thing to have an amazing spiritual experience, but, sometimes it takes a while before that's integrated and it's understood.
The experience can dissipate in the kind of, the feeling of it, but the knowledge or the insight that came with it doesn't. And you can kind of mistake myself, like having some sort of insight, and then the kind of, the bliss or the kind of take of it goes, and you go, all right, maybe that wasn't anything. But if it's holding on to, which is why I suppose that the hand is down, it's touching the earth, it's grounding it. That kind of a very he's in space, but there's it's to ground that. I suppose the flightiness of the deep inside or whatever, but to actually to make it a bit more concrete and manifested in some way. All these words are the wrong words, but hopefully pointing at the...
No, I think that's right. Yeah. I think that's right. It's like you're saying, being able to ground it, being able to put it into words. Once you can put an experience into words, then it shows that understanding is there. Perhaps I'm just gonna. That's what we're talking about.
Well, he is in space. There is land. There is ground underneath him. He's pointing down.
I love the way your fundamental idea, Tommie, about the desert background.
Yeah. I have to say, that's one of those things that I'm not sure that was my idea. I think that was the idea and I just kind of let it happen. As these things want to be. It was kind of, that's what this is. And I went, okay, that's what it is. Yeah. When we did it in the deck card, and then when it came to next, go, no, this works perfectly for everything. It was like there was a bit of grace there. So. Yeah.
All the cards have a kind of desert background to them, I mean, one of the things it brought to my mind was the desert of the real, which I think is Baudrillard, who said that, I think.
Yeah, most famously known, or probably known from The Matrix, however, these days.
Yeah, so all of them have this desert background, but in this card, as you can see, he's sort of floating out the desert, he's leaving the desert behind him. That's the only one, I think, where the figures in the card are outside. Yeah, really nice.
I didn't realise that until that moment. That's very good. Yeah, that's what I love. I love about art and creation and magic and all these things, is that it continuously unfolds.
Yeah, the Nidanas as well. They have traditional depictions.
Sure. Yeah.
If you've ever seen that big poster, that you'll sometimes see in Buddhist centres, I think it's called the Bhava Chakra, the wheel of life, and there's this big demon. Holding this wheel, and there's the 6 Buddhist realms in there, the hungry ghosts, the gods, all that stuff. But there's also the Nidanas that are around the kind of perimeter of the wheel. There's 12 of them. The transcendental ones aren't there, just the standard ones. So they have traditional depictions, which some
ignored,
of them
for the most part.
Some of them you've ignored. Some of them you reworked in interesting ways. One of the most interesting, I think, was there's one called Name and Form, which is traditionally depicted as 2 guys in a boat.
Yeah.
But of course, you've got a desert, so
desert. Yeah. And I think it works. I think that works well. That's one of the things that when it came to it goes, well, this boat's going to be in a desert. That's awesome. It describes something or points to something.
So you've got 2 figures pushing a boat up a sand dune, which I think brings even more powerfully into focus the idea of being lost, totally lost. I mean, Name and Form is traditionally depicted as 2 guys in a boat because names and forms are, constructs that we put on things to give them some form, so that's why it's two guys in a boat, they're on this sort of like amorphous water. But I think what your image brings to life is, what are they doing there even?
what are you doing?
A boat in a desert.
Yeah. Because I suppose the name and the form thing is like, that's where the mistake happens, is because it's like, well, it's why knowing the name of something is one of the big magical things that like if you know the name of something, you have power over it, because you've contracted it, you've made it into something that it's limited it or delineated or put a thing around it that it's like you look at something there and then you go, that's a table. It goes, well, actually, it's only a table because we think it's a table or we call it a table, but it's a lump of wood or plastic or a place you could sleep on it, but we've limited it to table, or so push a boat. Yeah. It's like pushing the boat. I suppose there's the bit of the Fitzcarraldo bit to it as well, which is trying to push the boat over the mountain too, which is quite nice, kind of echoing it as well.
Nice.
The sensation one, I enjoyed the sensation one because it's the idea, I suppose, of sensation, which is this. Is a guy running onto a spike. That was kind of interesting, because you're trying to point to a certain idea, which is, and I think in the image, what's the original image of that one? Because I know you sent me one which was like, or we had an image of something where you had a nail, or I was thinking originally like a nail going under someone's fingernail, or it was maybe something going into someone's eye.
Yeah,
or something.
The traditional one is of a guy with an arrow in his eye.
I wanted to come away from making a horrible image, because that seemed more like that's more disgust. There's like, you're looking away from whatever. Whereas when it's something that's about to happen, that we can all kind of have feels, I think kind of points more to sensation than, I suppose disgust is a sensation too, but it's the inevitability of this action going to happen and what it's going to lead to, and how the guy running has no awareness at all in the moment just before it happens, what it's going. So I enjoyed that one.
Yeah. Like you're saying, I think that works better. Otherwise, it's more about gore, isn't it? But it's that anticipation that you've captured here. I think that really gets at the meaning of it. Craving
as well. That's the first one. I kind of like a guy who's you don't see too often, which is the smoking guy. Although I've seen an increase in people smoking recently, which is interesting. And of course, that lines up with the kind of standard Buddhist ideas of that suffering comes from craving, or but it's interesting that grasping is also in the Nidanas as well, which is, I suppose, sometimes craving and grasping can be used interchangeably, particularly in Western Buddhism. Yeah, I mean, one way to think of the difference between the two is maybe needs and wants. Like grasping is more getting at that sense of. I mean, you could say, like we grasp at oxygen. We instinctively need certain things in order to sustain ourselves, and that's what grasping is intended to convey. Craving is, is a step beyond that, where it's about attaching to things that we don't necessarily need. And I think with this guy here, there's a real sense of character about him, isn't there? Which I think captures. There's an attitude.
Yeah, I want this. I'm enjoying this.
There's a kind of, and I suppose in one sense, a selfishness, more of a selfishness with craving than there is with grasping, because like there can be a selflessness with grasping that you can't get with craving, because it's that trying to reach for something better, which craving is probably never reaching for something better. Well, I suppose you can crave liberation too. There's the and I mean, for grasping, you've got a young girl reaching for a fruit. I mean, there's a sense of innocence here, which is totally lacking. The
other one, isn't there? She needs to eat this lovely thing, and there's darkness in this card as well, which I think conveys the idea that it's something unconscious.
She's also holding up to the light, although in fairness, the light is the illusionary light of the moon. So. But it is that's the same movement. But I suppose you have to, again, it's this thing you have to start, somewhere. It has to.
Yeah.
It starts it all starts in an illusion or delusion or whatever.
So I had the teachings from Lee Brassington, and I quickly got obsessed with the Nidanas. And these were the days when I was in the IoT, and
Okay.
one of a common
Well,
task.
this is mid-noughties, is it? Kind of something like that? Is this Baptist Head period?
Yeah, probably
Okay.
shortly after that. One of the tasks that was often assigned by mentors when you're doing chaos magic is to make up your own oracle. Very chaos magic thing to do.
Very,
You know,
yeah.
you got the tarot, you got the I
I did
Ching.
it. I
Well,
did it myself.
yeah, make up your own. Make up your
Yeah,
own.
yeah.
So there was that going on in the background. You know, I was thinking about making up my own oracle, and then I got the Nidanas. And I remember I was on a train one night, and I was thinking to myself, how many Nidanas are there? There's 26. And then I was thinking about the Tree of Life. And I was thinking, well, 22 paths on the Tree of Life. 26, 22, that's about the same.
Yeah. I can shoehorn this in. There's no problem.
Yeah. So then I started sort of playing around with the Tree of Life and seeing if, any of the paths kind of matched the Nidanas. And of course they did.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And
All
so if you can match the Nidanas to the paths on the Tree of Life, then of course they map onto the tarot as well,
yeah.
which they do in interesting ways.
Yeah. You have a book, or you're in the process of writing a book, or you had written a book, and upon further work when we were doing this, you wanted to expand and look at more insights or whatever it is. I will not speak for you. You can say
There may be a book. There may be.
it may.
I may
Yeah.
get around to rewriting it, but there's also 2 episodes of the podcast that I
Indeed,
did
yeah.
On the Nidanas. So such a thing as the book doesn't appear.
Yeah. I suspect it will. One time, it's probably these things arrive when they're meant to arrive.
I think the Nidanas do really work as an oracle, as the basis of an oracle. I mean, basically, what you need for an oracle is a picture of reality.
Sure. Yeah,
So the most simple one, is like tossing a coin. You've got a picture of reality there, which is yes, no, positive, negative. That's the most kind of simple,
black and
simple
white
picture of duality that you could possibly have. And then the I Ching, the tarot, they offer a kind of model of
the
way
runes,
things are.
same.
Yeah, the runes, yeah. And then you're able to interrogate that model.
Yeah.
And I think the Nidanas are just as rich as any of these other models. Basically what you've got there is a delineation of the stages by which things come into manifestation. And the delineation of the stages by which things transcend manifestation. There you go. There's really rich, powerful model.
I like that it adds different things to divination that you don't have available in other things, in that because it is a stage in and out, these things, part of when a card arrives or when you do a reading, you can see, is it coming more from the first half? Is it coming more from the second half? Am I getting, emboldened in the problem, or am I getting released? There's an element of showing you what direction. It can, there's also like the stage. You can the in and out. That you don't, you can certainly you can have it in like the trump cards of the tarots, but it's not quite. There's a different flavor, and I know myself, having used it, because a number of times I spent a couple of weeks just doing readings every day, just to try to become familiar with it and to get as an oracle rather than just a piece of art, and to have the kind of energy transfer between your hands, your brain, all of that stuff that you have to kind of get through with it, divination. And there's a definite character to it, that is very different from, say, the 40 Servants, or from tarot for me as well. Not necessarily, I suppose, a personality, but it reads, it answers questions in a very different way than other oracles, which is great, because that's what you want. You want a fresh kind of look, at things, or a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
A new way in. Since you've got it, you've done a few readings, how do you find it, the character of it, or the kind of soul or spirit of it? It doesn't pull punches, stern, I would say.
No, it's a bit stern, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just kind of go, you asked the question, what do you want?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting, the characters that oracles can have. When I was a kid, I remember reading a booklet about the tarot. I can't remember who it was by. This was years ago, and the person writing this booklet was talking about how the tarot is basically a very detailed description of how things change.
Okay.
So you can read the major arcana of the tarot as going through gradations, describing what change itself is. So everything changes, but paradoxically, that means that the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. That's constant
Sure.
because everything changes.
Yeah.
So reading the major arcana is delineating a process of change. I mean, things like, you've got the hangman, which is about reframing things, let's say, recontextualizing things. And then you've got the death card, which is then what you've reframed and recontextualized is suddenly blown away. It's all gone.
It's never about that, apart from when it's about that.
Yeah. Yeah. But of course, this is explicit in the Nidanas. This is up front. It is an anatomy of change, of how things come to be and of how things cease to be.
And of course, in this one as well, as opposed to the 40 servants, which I don't read reversals, simply because I think there's corresponding servants for each thing that it would, like say, the opposite of the carnal, reading it upside down is the chaste, so it seems a bit redundant. But reversals certainly work in the Nidana deck. It's like designed that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think there's something related to Buddhism here. In Buddhism, there's that idea of the near enemy.
Yes.
So say you have something like compassion, the near enemy of compassion is pity.
Sure.
And it's something that can look the same, but isn't quite. And, I mean, we probably should mention there is a booklet with the cards, that's got all the meanings there, and the reverse meanings as well. And generally with the reverse meanings, what I did there was to kind of think of, what would be a near enemy of this card.
Sure, right.
So if we go back to faith, something like blind belief would be a near enemy of faith.
Yeah, fundamentalism or something like that kind of.
Yeah.
And I suppose that the liberation is thinking the near enemy would be thinking you have something you don't, that you're not, you're not actually seeing what you think you're seeing, though.
Yeah,
kind of stuff. And I think it works really well, the reversal stuff, because of that. It's like it's not saying it's the opposite. It's saying it's very close. It's just the shit version of it. It's like you're nearly there, but it's not. And it's when you realize it's the shit version of it, it's not the same at all. It's pity and compassion are very different things, but look the same. But in essence, are fundamentally very different things. Coming from a completely different point of view, a completely different hierarchy, but can look the same. And you think what you're doing is compassion, and then you realize it's pity, and then that's the disenchantment again. And you have all of these. It
happens all the time. This sort of stuff. We encounter things like this so often, don't we? When things seem to be one thing, but they turn out to be another. And that's that principle, that fundamental principle of ignorance in action. That constant misconstrual.
One of my kind of things that I always have an issue with is that this kind of notion that everything is an illusion, which is probably more a new age kind of outlook in things. And I think the word delusion is better, because illusion implies that there isn't a thing, whereas delusion, there is a thing, you're just wrong about it.
There's definitely a thing.
Yeah. It's clearly
there's definitely a thing. Yeah, I don't exist, but the thing exists.
Yeah, but that's the fate thing, is it? Something is happening. I don't know what it is. I think it's this. I think it's Tommie. Definitely not Tommie, but that's how it feels. And the other way as well, of course, not just as a divination deck, it's a great tool for concentration practice or meditative practice. Or, one thing that I want to do is, go through each card one a day, and, have that as my theme for the day. Try and see the world through, each of these lenses every day. Some days it'll work better than others, but some days I definitely think it'll lend some insight to, how you're handling certain problems, whatever, or, because you wouldn't naturally maybe come into the world and your workplace or whatever it is through the lens of fate, or through the lens of liberation or debt. I could be dead tomorrow. maybe this piece of work doesn't really matter that much, or whatever it is, but it forces you into a paradigm, I suppose, of how you're approaching the world, which I think could be quite helpful. Particularly if you start and you end in liberation. There's a nice path there. It'd be worse if it was the other way. Then after your 26 days, you end it in debt rather than which its own liberation. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's probably going to be other uses to it as well that will reveal itself as well.
Yeah.
Which is always
Well,
good.
just as a tool for understanding the Nidanas, to have a pictorial representation of them and to enable you to think deeply about them, because they're a powerful teaching in themselves. I mean, like I was saying, if you understand the Nidanas, you've nailed Buddhism, basically.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You have it.
It's the perennial question, isn't it? I mean, I think, doing spiritual practice, we spend a lot of our time thinking, is this what it seems to be? Where am I now? We're doing that all of the time. I think the idea of fractals can be useful, states within states.
So just I suppose to finish up without it going too long, the deck will be available in two versions. One is the standard deck, which is, if you have the 40 servants deck, it's exactly the same size. It's the standard tarot size. The cards themselves are, if you know what a Magic the Gathering card is, it's exactly the same weight, texture, and it's the same paper essentially used that. But you'll know it's the standard kind of tarot card. And then you have the deluxe version, which
Lovely box.
Yeah, both of them come with the booklet, just so.
Yeah. And
all the details.
How would you describe the differences in the cards, Tommie? I mean, they're bigger for a start, aren't they?
They're not twice the size, but they're quite bigger. The more, I would say that the deluxe deck, for me, if I was using it, this is my personal kind of preference, I would use the standard deck for divination, for having on me. And if I was doing the more contemplative stuff, I would use the bigger deck so that you can put it on like an easel on your altar, or, have your candles and go full woo with it. But that's not to say that they're too cumbersome to do divination, but you certainly could.
Yeah, I mean, if you're into tarot, this is more of a Thoth deck experience, isn't
it? Yeah. And my preference, and everyone will have their own preference, but Duncan was saying it was his preference as well, is the 3-card reading. It's always been my preference for readings. It just seems to lend itself the best. Although the standard pull one card out for a quick answer, can also lead to, some insights as well. But, it should work with any amount of different spreads, whatever's your favorite. But I don't know, 3-card trick, the best for me.
Yeah. There's quite a bit of crossover with the tarot. I mean, I would say any spread that would work for just the major arcana cards of the tarot will probably work for the Nidana cards.
Yeah.
But 3 cards just seems to do it.
Yeah. So, have you anything else you would like to say before you get back in and start finishing this book? Get going.
No, I just wanted to say, thank you for what you've done on this, Tommie. I mean, I've had this idea floating around for a long, long time. And, it's just been great to meet you and, to finally come into contact with somebody who has really brought out, amazing qualities of these ideas, into some beautiful images.
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind. Yeah. Thank you very much for asking me. It was a privilege and a pleasure, and you're one of the easiest people I've ever experienced to work with. So that's my return compliment to you. And I'm delighted. I'm so happy it's coming out. I can't wait for people to get their hands on it and to enjoy it and use it and be able to, I suppose, to talk about it and show the images more online rather than just on the hidden corridors of Patreon, and get it out there, get people to see it.
I mean,
it's
the Nidanas are a really powerful teaching, and I hope people, can connect with that. It's very, very
I can't imagine that they won't, given that it's a map of truth. You have to connect in some way. So yeah, as of this video being out, then that means that the deck is available and all the links will be in the show description. And yeah, there'll be daily posts for a while. And we're going to do, as we said a number of times, going to do some short videos on each card, which will probably talk a bit about what the card traditionally represents, what the image was, how it would be used in divination, and why I changed the artwork to reflect something different.
But there's a rationale for everyone, because we thrashed through all of them, didn't we?
Yes,
there's good reasons why we changed the things.
It's like there was no changing anything purely for aesthetic reasons. It was because that makes more sense, or it's describing something that's we wanted to describe within the kind of more traditional kind of view. But I would say it's definitely shows its chaos magic roots. So if that's something that you like the sound of, then please go and buy it. And buy one for your friend, buy one for your mother, buy one for your father, buy one for your cousins, and everyone you went to school with. So that's it. Right, Duncan, thank you very much. We'll be talking to you soon. And well, your websites will be in the show description, but where can people find you? What are you up to now? All your stuff?
Oh, all my stuff is on my website, Occult Experiments in the Home, which is oeith.co.uk.
Excellent. Right. Brilliant. Nice one. So hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. And if you have an interest in finding out more about the deck, then all the links will be in the show description, including the links to where you can purchase it and some links to get all the kind of free resources or the free information that is up on the website. So check that out if it's something that you think you might be interested in. And if not, then I will talk to you all soon in the regular episodes of Adventures in Woo-Woo that come out mostly every week at this point. And may our best days be ahead, my good friends, and be well.